NATO was established in 1949, marking 75 years of collective defense and the most powerful military alliance in human history. It is held together through the Cold War, the fall of the Soviet Union, the events of September 11th, and conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as Russia's invasion of Ukraine. However, today, on March 16, 2026, Donald Trump threatened to end it. This was not because of a Russian attack or a Chinese provocation, but because the United Kingdom, Germany, France, Japan, and Australia all said the same two-letter word to the President of the United States: no. Trump demanded that NATO allies send warships to the Strait of Hormuz, the 5-mile choke point through which 1/5 of the world's entire oil supply normally flows. He stated that countries that rely on Gulf oil should send their navies to protect it, calling it a very small endeavor. He warned that he would remember which countries helped and which ones did not. In an interview with the Financial Times, he issued words that have now sent shockwaves through every foreign ministry on the planet, stating that a failure to help would be very bad for the future of NATO. Tonight, we show you exactly why every major ally said no and why their reasons are far more devastating to Trump's strategy than anyone in Washington wants to admit. We show you what is happening to oil prices right now and exactly what it means for your gas bill this week. We show you the one country that quietly got 2 tankers through the Strait while everyone else was arguing, and what that reveals about who is actually winning this crisis. And finally, we show you the 3 words from Germany's government that may be the most important statement made about NATO since the alliance was founded. Let us start with Germany, because Germany's response was not a diplomatic maybe, nor was it a careful "we are considering our options." Germany's Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, sent a spokesperson to the cameras who delivered 3 words that have never been said about a NATO request in 75 years of the alliance's existence: not NATO's war. The German government added that participation in any activity in the Strait of Hormuz had not been considered before this war and is not being considered now. Germany's own foreign minister, arriving in Brussels, told reporters he does not see a role for NATO members in the Strait of Hormuz at all. That is not hesitation. That is a door being closed, locked, and bolted. France was equally direct. France's armed forces minister said the country would maintain a defensive and protective posture and would not be drawn into a war led by the United States and Israel. Not our war, not our coalition, not our problem to solve with French warships, was the clear sentiment. The United Kingdom's Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, said the UK would not be drawn into the wider war, while simultaneously announcing a £53 million package to help British households struggling with heating oil bills driven up by the crisis. In other words, Starmer is spending government money to protect British families from the consequences of a war his own ally started, while refusing to send ships to help fight it. Japan stated that its own laws strictly limit overseas military deployments, and suggested operations in the Strait of Hormuz might not even pass legal muster. Prime Minister Takeuchi told Parliament directly, "We have not made any decisions whatsoever about dispatching escort ships." Australia said it has not been asked and will not be sending ships. South Korea said it was considering the request, which in diplomatic language means almost certainly no. Iran's own Revolutionary Guard naval commander responded to Trump's coalition call with 4 words: let him send ships. Here is the detail that exposes the full scale of Trump's isolation. It is not just America's allies refusing. The United States Navy itself has been refusing near-daily requests from the shipping industry to escort commercial vessels through the strait. Reuters reported that the U.S. Navy told shipping companies the risk of attacks was simply too high. Trump is demanding that Germany, France, Japan, and the UK send their warships into waters so dangerous that America's own Navy will not enter. That is not a small endeavor. That is a request to send Allied sailors into a shooting gallery that America itself has decided to avoid. But while every Western ally was saying no, one country quietly said nothing and then did something extraordinary. What it did tells you everything about who is actually in control of this crisis. While Trump was posting ultimatums on social media and NATO allies were holding emergency briefings, India's Foreign Minister, S. Jaishankar, sat down with the Financial Times and said something that stopped every analyst in Washington cold. He said India had been in direct negotiations with Tehran. He stated those negotiations had already yielded results and revealed that 2 Indian-flagged gas tankers had passed through the Strait of Hormuz on Saturday. While every Western nation was still arguing about whether to send warships, 2 tankers went through a closed strait without a single shot fired and without a single warship escort, accomplished through diplomacy. Iran's own foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, confirmed that Tehran has been approached by a number of countries seeking safe passage for their vessels, and that the decision on whether to grant passage is up to the Iranian military. Iran is not blocking everyone. Iran is blocking specifically and deliberately the United States and its allies. Tehran says the strait is open to all except American-affiliated shipping. which means the crisis is not a geographic blockade. It is a political one, and the countries that are not Washington's allies are quietly negotiating their way through it, one tanker at a time. China has said keeping the Strait open is important for international trade, while simultaneously importing Iranian oil that flows quite nicely. According to Barbara Slavin of the Stimson Center, Trump threatened to cancel his planned summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping unless Beijing helps unblock the Strait. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said, "We will see whether the visit takes place as scheduled." China's foreign ministry said the two sides are still communicating. Translation: Beijing is watching, waiting, importing Iranian oil, and calculating exactly how long it can stay out of this crisis while every Western nation takes the damage. Here is the number that makes every one of these diplomatic calculations personal for you, because right now, today, this crisis is sitting inside your gas tank. The math of what comes next is something every family needs to understand. Oil hit nearly $115 a barrel this morning, the highest level since July 2022. U.S. gas prices are now at their highest since October 2023, and diesel is just shy of $5 a gallon. The International Energy Agency stated directly this weekend that the war in the Middle East is creating the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. Not the largest in recent years, not the largest since the 1970s oil embargo, but the largest in history. Here is why the numbers keep climbing despite the emergency reserve release. The IEA's 32 member nations agreed last week to release 400 million barrels of oil from emergency reserves, the largest coordinated release in the agency's history. However, CNN confirmed this morning that at the current rate of disruption, 15 million barrels of crude and 5 million barrels of oil products are cut off from global markets every single day. That 400 million barrel emergency buffer would be completely absorbed in just 20 days. The emergency reserve is a band-aid on a wound that requires surgery, and the surgery requires opening the Strait. Opening the Strait requires either a deal with Iran or a military operation that every major ally on Earth just refused to join. 1,000 oil tankers are currently stranded and unable to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. At least 10 oil tankers have been hit, targeted, or have reported attacks since February 28th. According to maritime trade operations data, Iran has planted naval mines in the waterway. The IRGC has warned it will set ablaze any vessel that attempts the crossing without Iranian permission. EU energy ministers are meeting today specifically to discuss how to curb rising energy costs. Iran's new supreme leader has promised to keep the maritime artery closed, while senior Iranian officials have warned the world to expect oil at $200 a barrel if the situation escalates further. Sitting above all of these numbers, above the tankers and the mines and the oil prices, is the single most important geopolitical question of this entire crisis. What happens to NATO if nobody answers Trump's call? The answer changes everything about the world your children will grow up in. Here is what a very bad future for NATO actually means. NATO's Article 5, the principle that an attack on one member is an attack on all, is the single most powerful security guarantee in human history. It is the reason Western Europe has not fought a major war in 80 years. It is the reason small nations bordering Russia sleep at night. It is the reason the Baltic states, Poland, Romania, and a dozen other countries chose to align with the West rather than accommodate Moscow. The entire architecture of Western security rests on one assumption, that when America calls, its allies answer, and when allies are in danger, America answers back. What happened today did not break that assumption, but it bent it in ways that will take years to straighten. Germany said this is not NATO's war. France said they will not be drawn in. Japan said their laws may not permit it. The UK said they will not be drawn into the wider war. Crucially, none of them are wrong. The Strait of Hormuz is not NATO territory. The war with Iran was not started by a NATO member being attacked. Article 5 does not apply. Every ally that said no today did so on legally and strategically defensible grounds. Trump responded by threatening the future of the entire alliance. That specific dynamic is the one that every adversary of the Western world is studying tonight. Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea are all watching to see whether American threats against its own allies land harder than American threats against its enemies. Meanwhile, India got 2 tankers through the Strait on Saturday with a phone call. While Washington was threatening NATO, New Delhi was negotiating with Tehran. While Trump was posting ultimatums, Indian diplomats were quietly delivering results. The Strait of Hormuz is not closed to everyone. It is closed to America and its allies. This means the crisis has a diplomatic solution. It just requires talking to Iran. The country doing that talking and actually getting tankers through is not the United States. It is the world's most populous democracy operating independently and protecting its own national interest. While the Western alliance argues about warships, oil is at $115, diesel is nearly $5 a gallon, and 1,000 tankers are stranded. The emergency reserve will run out in 20 days at current disruption levels. Every major Western ally has said no to Trump's coalition. America's own Navy is refusing to escort ships through the Strait, and the President of the United States is threatening to destroy the 75-year-old alliance that has kept the peace in Europe because France and Germany will not send their sailors into waters. America itself considers too dangerous. That is where we are tonight, and what happens in the next 72 hours will determine whether this is a crisis that gets managed or a turning point that reshapes the entire world order. The situation is connected to a much larger narrative. We have conducted a breaking investigation into Trump's NATO ultimatum over the Strait of Hormuz. Every fact in this report was verified from NPR, CNN, CNBC, Al Jazeera, the Financial Times, and the Kiev Post, all published in the last 3 hours. Stay informed with verified breaking coverage of the stories that are changing your world. Share this, because what happens in that 5-mile strait in the next 72 hours will determine what you pay for gas, what you pay for food, and what the alliance that has kept the peace for 75 years looks like on the other side.